Seneca, I'm John Kane, and I welcome you to Let's Talk Native on this Saturday, April 11th, 2020. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do encourage and in some cases start conversations. We kind of break the rules here for Native radio. We don't do prayers and we don't do buffalo speeches or get all Native mystic or anything like that. We take a tough look at history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity. And we may step on a few toes along the way, but our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We will take on the false narratives and provide critical thinking to all that's heaped upon us, and we do it all right here live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. So let's talk Native. But first, let me remind folks that our audio streams live on our website, which is www.letstalknative.com. We stream live video of the show on Facebook Live on a bunch of Facebook group pages. We take the audio and we put it up on SoundCloud, which goes out as a podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms. We take the video and we put it up on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. So I suggest that you subscribe to our podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel. But I also really want to encourage people to go to our website. I'm wearing one of our shirts. It is one of our Dakota 38 shirts. I know you're not used to seeing Abraham Lincoln in your history books with a noose in his hands, but let's be honest. Abraham Lincoln was responsible for the largest mass execution in the history of the United States when 38 Dakota were hung on a single day, the day after Christmas, and this shirt is a reminder of that. On the back, it's got a list of all 38 of those that were executed that day in the largest mass execution in the history of the United States, and it's a conversation starter. We've got a bunch of these other shirts like this on our in our store, so take a look at the shirts that are there. We've got some Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women shirts. Some Let's Talk Native logo shirts, as well as we even got Trump's likeness on a Whiteskins T-shirt to mock the Washington football team. So we got a bunch of. So take a look at it. There's probably an occasion that you may deem worthy of wearing such a shirt. So take a look at what we got there. All right, I'm gonna. Well, first off, I'm John Kane. I'm the host and producer of the show. I'm joined here in studio by Jake Proud, who's managing our audio and our video. And again, I want to thank you guys for tuning in and catching the show. I know that I'm having conversations that are oftentimes not the common wisdom that is espoused by Native radio or talking heads or anybody else. So. And specifically now, look, I get it that we need to be very, very skeptical of any of the stuff that we're fed, spoon-fed by the federal government, by state government, by history books, by the media, all of that stuff. And I agree that there's a fair level of either propaganda or certainly a lack of transparency associated with this COVID-19 pandemic. I will say, though, I think I've got a different view than all the other. I hate to even say conspiracy theorists, but some of them are. But all the other folks who think they're being lied to, many people think the whole thing's a hoax. And that's not just the Trump people who say that. There are others who try to suggest that as well. There are a fair number of people who think the whole thing has been blown out of proportion, that it's all about trying to install tracking devices on our phone and RFID chips in our hands, and some of that may be true. I don't know how much is government versus how much is information technology, but I don't think the thing is being hyped up and made a bigger deal than it really is. I think just the opposite. I think this thing is far worse, and I've thought it from the beginning that this is far worse than what they're letting us know. And here's what concerns me. Just this past week, Tony Fauci, Trump's medical expert, who most people have probably given more trust to than anybody else in the Trump administration, but he had suggested that he believes that a more accurate number for what they anticipate the total deaths to be will be in the 60,000 range, as opposed to their initial estimate, which was 100,000 to 200,000 people dying. Now, there's a part of me that thought they threw a big number out there so Trump could be assured that he could come in under that number and say, see how many lives I saved. So there was a part of me that believed that. And the fact that they've turned this number down and saying it's because, social distancing has worked and that kind of thing, I think there's something else that troubles me about all that. And here's what it is. The United States has only tested about 0.8%. So 0.8% of the U.S. population. So they haven't even reached 1%, okay? Out of that number, over 500,000 people have been confirmed as positive, testing positive. Out of that 500,000 people, 20,000 people have died. And that's just in the United States. And that's less than 1% of the population tested. Now, so for them to suggest that it's only going to be 60,000, here's the problem. That 20,000 people, those are only people who have tested positive. So if you are sick, even today, if you're sick and you've got, labored breathing and, your lungs are filling up, you are not going to get tested unless you need to be admitted to a hospital, unless your breathing becomes life-threatening to where you need to be, but they probably are going to test you. So there's a whole lot of people who have this disease who will never be tested. And most of them will survive it. Not all of them will. Because, according to some of the reports coming out of New York City, last week, and I talked about it before, last week, one of the city council members suggested that there was between 180 and 195 people a day dying in one way or another from COVID-19. And they're not testing dead people. If you really want to know how many people die from this disease, the only way to know is to test everybody who dies. I'm not opposed to that notion, to be honest with you, because you're never going to get out in front of it. With all the testing and all the bragging about testing and rapid testing and various tests being deployed and that kind of stuff, the United States has only tested less than 1% of the population. But even with only 1% of the population, they're a third the way there on this 60,000 estimate. Honestly, I think they got 60,000 people that may have died already on this thing. But they'll never know because they're not going to test dead people. Tigers, I guess they'll test, but they aren't going to. And in fact, that's what they said in New York. They said initially, when people were dying at home, they were trying to do some level of testing, but they got overrun. They couldn't do that. So why would people die at home? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. Oh, well, first let me. The latest story on the New York Times had suggested that there's been a 400% increase in cardiac arrest at home in New York City. A 400% increase over a 10-day period. That's alarming. And look, the likelihood is most of those, and again, this is speculation, most of those are probably associated with COVID-19, the uptick. But even the ones that their heart didn't give out because of labored breathing, which is what would happen. The reason they put you on a ventilator is because they're afraid you are going to wear out and organs are going to fail. That's why they put you on a ventilator. Not because a ventilator is the great option, it's the only option. So if you're home and you can't breathe, there's a good chance you will end up dying of cardiac arrest. Now here's the other thing. And I'm not saying this was handled wrong. I'm just saying, just purely from an observational standpoint. If you have spent over a month predicting an overrun of the hospital, a shortage of staff, a shortage of beds, a shortage of ICU, a shortage of masks, a shortage of ventilators, a shortage of all this stuff, and you're home and you're realizing that these hospitals are being overrun by COVID-19, or at least people who suspect that they're positive with COVID-19, there's a real likelihood that you don't want to go to the hospital, even if you think you've maybe suffered a small heart attack. I'm at more risk going to the hospital than staying home. So there may be some people who are dying at home not because they have COVID-19, but because COVID-19 has changed the whole relationship between a person who would normally go to the hospital. Here's the other downside. If you go to the hospital and you are diagnosed with COVID-19 and you get to the place where you're on a respirator, and again, Cuomo's own numbers, he's saying 80% of the people who get put on a ventilator, which means you have been put under anesthesia, you're unconscious, and they put a tube down your throat, and they pump air into your lungs, and that's how you're breathing. They pump air in, and they let your lungs deflate on their own. That's what a ventilator does. In case you're a little unclear, it's different than just putting a mask on and getting fresh oxygen. This is, you are put under. So if 80% of the people who get put on a ventilator don't survive. And now I'm not saying the 20% who do survive, that I'm not making any kind of judgment about whether it's worth it or not. Of course, if you can save lives, save lives. But the likelihood is, if you get put on a ventilator, you got an 80% chance of not ever coming off of it. And the longer you're on it, because these ventilators actually do damage to your lungs. They actually wear out the tiny sacs at the end, because they're not used to being inflated by force. They're used to having air drawn into them, not forced into them. It's a different physical activity for your lungs. But if you go to the hospital, your family can't visit you. And some people, because of the grieving process, everything from funerals to the last rites and all that other stuff, and this has religious connotations associated with it. Part of the reason that hospice has become so popular is because people would rather, when they know they're going to die, they'd rather die at home with their families. Nobody wants to go to a hospital and never see their loved ones again and die in a hospital bed alone. So when I hear Andrew Cuomo saying, "Oh, we're having a reduction in the hospital admissions," I don't know that that's necessarily a true sign that there are less people getting sick. It'd be nice to believe that, and I'm sure that's kind of what you have to say if you're a politician, right? But Andrew Cuomo's been talking for over a month about the chaos that was going to happen at hospitals, and it would have, and it has actually. I know Trump gets all bent out of shape if somebody asks him, there still seems to be problems with people getting tested. He goes, "No, there isn't." Well, that's not what hospitals were saying. Oh, there still seems to be a problem with masks. There are still nurses right now that are using one mask for an entire day or multiple days. That's a problem, folks. That's just a problem. So my concern is that 100 to 200,000 people dying of this disease, that prediction that was early on, that may not just be an inflated number that Trump was going to come under. That may be accurate, but you're not going to know. Because there's no system in place to verify all of the deaths across the United States. I know it's easy to concentrate on New York because New York is producing some numbers that they're addressing some of these issues about dying at home, deaths that are happening that most would assume are COVID-19, although they will never make the list. And I know I've got a bunch of conspiracy theorists who said, "Oh no, they're bumping up the numbers. They're counting anybody who dies as a COVID death." No, they're not. If you haven't been tested, then they're not going to put you as somebody who died as a confirmed positive COVID victim. And so the numbers are now. And I'll admit, I spend a lot of time looking at the numbers, and maybe I obsess over them a little bit. But here's the thing with the numbers. They're only relevant to the numbers from the previous day, and they're only relevant based on the percentage of people who are being tested. Now, I know Trump likes to brag that he's doing a wonderful job, but here's the cold hard facts. The United States has more confirmed by test cases than any other country, 3 times more than its nearest competitor. And there's only a few countries that are even within that ballpark comparison. So they have far and away, like I said, they're at 532,000 confirmed cases today. They have over 20,000 dead today. So I look at these numbers, and you realize, again, they're completely based only on people who have been tested, and it's based on a relatively small amount of people, percentage of the population. So what does that number look like? Okay, right now, again, the United States has tested, as of today, about 0.8. That's 0.8% of the U.S. population. So, but how does that compare? I mean, because Trump's saying they're doing wonderfully, that they're managing this thing better. They're the envy of the entire world. I don't think you're the envy of the entire world if you have more dead people and you have more cases. And when you look at the numbers, the United States leads in total cases and leads in death right now on this disease. But I get it. They're a big country, lots of people, 330 million people. But as a percentage of their population, 41 other countries have tested a higher percentage of their population than the United States. I mean, look, if you're a bigger country, you also should have more resources. So you should be able to test at a higher rate, especially if you're the quote unquote greatest country on the planet. But the United States is 42nd out of 200, at a little over 200 countries. There are 41 other countries that have done a higher percentage of testing per their population than the United States. And there are 2 countries that are massively bigger than the United States, and their numbers are not as high as the United States. Now, I will say that I don't necessarily trust their numbers. I find it hard to believe that China's numbers are as low as what they're saying it is. I mean, you're talking about 1.5 billion people there. India, 1.3 billion people, and they're down the list. Russia and India are moving up the list. And actually, I don't know if you saw this, Jake, but China had a spike in active cases today. They had 99 cases added today, which is the most that they've added in quite some time. They've been coming in at 10, 20, 30 cases a day. And and today they had almost 100 new cases. Now they also just lifted some of the travel restrictions in China. So there's a big push right now by Trump to want to end this economic shutdown in the United States. Yet he's still floating the date around like May 1st, that the United States will be back in business. Of course, the problem is Trump didn't shut it down. The governors in various states did. And at various levels. So he boasts that he has the authority to override governors. I'm not so sure that he does. I don't think he does. I mean, he can say it in a news conference. I don't think so. But his political career is hanging in the balance on this thing. So there's very little question about that. So he's going to want to put the country back in business. And he brags that the stock market, you know why the stock market went up this past week? Because Bernie threw in the towel. They know that the stock market doesn't have to worry about a socialist still making a run at the presidency. I mean, it's not because the numbers are great. I mean, I get it. They're Cuomo saying that they've reached a plateau because of hospital admissions. Like I said, I'm a little suspect to that. Trump's trying to say that, and his crew are all trying to say the curve's been flattened, but I don't know if it's flattened by spread or if it's flattened by the limited, testing capabilities. A few days ago, they were at 0.7%. Now they're up to 0.8. So, I mean, they're testing more every day, which means their active cases grow. If they stopped testing today, if they stopped adding active cases to their list right now, they still have a whole bunch of people that are in hospitals, and that death rate is going to continue without adding any active cases. So I'm concerned. I'm concerned. And, when we get to the second half of the show, I'm going to talk about some of the local stuff going on here and why that concern stays with me. But some of these numbers are really scary. And for me, what's more frightening about them is I think that they are underselling this thing. I think they're downplaying and they're reducing the numbers. I know a lot of people saying, oh, they're inflating the numbers. I don't believe they're inflating the numbers. There's no interest in the Trump administration to inflate the numbers. He doesn't want to, be the president that has, a larger death rate. He's going to downplay the numbers. And one of the ways to downplay the number, if you don't have, if you never get to a 10% of the population being tested, and I got to tell you, if 10% of the population got tested, which would be over 10 times what exists right now, those numbers would be incredible. And that's still only going to, I'm still only talking about 10%. By the time the United States gets to 1%, 1% of the population, which will take probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 days. I think that 20,000 number for the amount of people that have died will easily be 40,000. I think that would easily be 40,000 within by the time the United States gets over 1%. And if I'm wrong, look, I talk about these numbers every show, so I'll tell you. Well, no, I misjudged. They didn't get to 40,000; they only got to 30,000. But that's. I mean, I'm looking at the numbers and the trends. And again, I know a lot of people out there saying, "Oh, you're believing everything they're telling you." No, I'm not. I'm not believing what they're telling me. I think they're downplaying this thing. I think it's worse than what they're letting people know. And look, and here's the saddest and the most morbid part of all this. Most of the people who will die of this are older and have underlying conditions. And as far as the United States, and as far as, people who are interested in the economy, they are the people who add and have the least positive impact on the economy. And I know this sounds pretty shitty, but I honestly, if a whole lot of older people who are more costly in terms of health coverage, Medicare, Medicaid, all that stuff, that would be good for the U.S. economy. And these guys are making that calculation. And just like I said about the Democrats are making a calculation too. The more people who die, the better chance they have of beating Trump in November in the election. I mean, it comes down to that, folks. It really does come down to that. Trump's going to try to, mask the numbers and continue to boast that he's handled this thing perfectly. He's handled it beautifully, that the United States is the envy of the world, that there's no problems whatsoever, and that as soon as he can, throw the switch, that the economy is going to bounce back, and that he's led the strongest economy in the history of the world and all that other stuff, ignoring the fact that the unemployment numbers are almost a fabrication. The income disparity has been a joke. You have more homeless people than you've ever had before. He's done everything he can to reduce the number of people who get adequate health care. And of course, neither Trump nor the presumptive Democratic nominee have any interest in nationalizing medicine and making sure that everybody's covered. Instead, they're going to continue down the path that, nope, financial products need to be purchased by everybody. Insurance needs to be purchased by everybody. We're not going to even talk about health care. We're going to talk about financial products that we want everybody to buy. And I got to tell you, all the stimulus money, there's a cost to it, folks. They're not even printing this money. They're just injecting this money electronically into the system. People talk about fiat currency, this idea that currency doesn't really have value except for what a country says it has. They manipulate the value of the currency falsely. At some point, the piper has to get paid here. What all of this means is that, again, the global economy continues to operate at a higher and higher and higher level of debt. So the potential for economic collapse, if you think the economy's collapsed already, you're wrong. It hasn't yet. This hasn't been an economic collapse. Yeah, a lot of people unemployed, but hell, they're still they're going to send a bunch of checks to people. And for a very short time, there will be a net positive impact by people getting these checks. But at some point, this idea that there's more currency in the system and that currency doesn't have anything backing it other than somebody's word, that by definition is credit. It's a dangerous situation. And that's kind of where it's at. All right, hey, I'm going to take a break here, and we're going to take a break. When I come back, I do have to give some updates. There are confirmed cases on Seneca Nation territory, both in Allegheny and in Cattaraugus, so I'm going to talk about that. I'm not going to name names, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit. There's also been a bit of a dust-up between the Seneca Nation and the NFTA, the Niagara, what is it called? Niagara Frontier Transportation Authority. So their bus systems, which used to run out to Seneca territory from Buffalo. And as of me looking at the NFTA site tonight, they have ceased to bring those buses out to Seneca territory. I'll explain why, what the dust up was all about, and my concerns about it either way. The concerns that the Seneca people had about it in the first one. We'll talk about that when we come back. And of course, there was also the other bit of news. It was it sounds like the Seneca Nation is finally getting going to have the capability to do testing, not just get test kits, but even possibly the equipment to do the testing. We're 2 months into this, global pandemic, but it looks like, and I don't know what the delay was caused by, but finally, the Seneca Nation looks like they're going to be in a position to do some testing, because I know there hasn't been a whole lot being done. So we'll talk about that when we come back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. We'll be back in a minute. All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Hey, I want to give a shout out to my sponsors, Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and EDRW Enterprises, the good folks at Grand River Enterprises, and NWS. I want to thank those guys for supporting us on a really regular basis and for quite some time. I mean, these guys have been with us for a while. We've been doing this for over 10 years. We used to be on commercial radio, and now we're in our own studio. So our market's a little different. We don't do advertisements. We're not on commercial radio. We basically do podcasts and videos, and there are a couple of radio stations, internet and others that carry the show. But it's a little bit of a different animal than it used to be when I was on commercial radio in Buffalo. But it makes those individuals who continue to support the show, even the ones who do it occasionally, it makes a big difference. It allows us to buy additional pieces of equipment to do some things, expand our capabilities and that kind of stuff. So I appreciate that. And of course, we're doing also my New York show out of this studio now. I'm not making the trip to New York, which isn't more expensive, but again, it gives us more to do here. So again, I want to thank all those people who support the show. Look, I also want to thank you guys who share the show. My wife in particular, who shares the show across a whole bunch of Facebook platforms or group pages. Those of you who share the podcasts and the YouTube videos. I do encourage you to go to my website. Again, we've got a bit of a store. We got some merchandise that you guys can check out. We have a photo gallery. We've got links to the YouTube videos, links to the podcast, all of that stuff. And you can also listen to the show 24/7. When we're not live, we're just running old shows that are kind of a loop. You probably won't even catch the same show twice, because we've got years of shows that cycle through on that feed, on that 24-hour feed. When we're live, that feed turns into just this live broadcast. So you can check that out. Hey, one thing I want to be clear: the total for the entire globe right now stands at 1,779,099. By in a couple of days, that will be actually probably by tomorrow. It'll be 2.5 million people. I mean, that's how fast this thing is growing. And look, I know people are still trying to compare it to the flu, and they're using either false data. I saw somebody say something. Well, the number of severe cases of the flu last year resulted in this many deaths. Well, you said severe cases. You didn't say just people who, just like, the flu, people just get like a little more than cold symptoms as well. just like this one, that many people will walk away from this thing just fine. But the older folks and the people who with underlying conditions, whether it's respiratory conditions or whether it's other diabetes, heart conditions, blood pressure issues, there are any number of underlying conditions that that factor into this thing. I just had to think of something. I want to give a shout out and a congratulations to Charlie Lowery. She is just one of my favorite performers. She's Tuscarora from North Carolina. She got a kidney transplant. She's been waiting for 3.5 years, and Charlie just got a new kidney on Thursday. She got the call Wednesday night. She got the the transplant done on Thursday, and she was on Facebook on Friday, thanking everybody for the support. So I want to give a shout out and congratulations and well wishes to Charlie Lowery, who has been basically going through dialysis for over 3 years, and she's just a great performer, great voice, one of my favorite Native performers. So again, my shout out to Charlie Lowery. When I thought about underlying conditions, it made me think of Charlie. So anyway, all right. So what's the status here in Seneca territory? Well, for the longest while, the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation was on the Erie County map, the COVID map that they had, right? The COVID-19 map, and the only place on that Erie County map that didn't have a confirmed case was the Cattaraugus, Seneca Cattaraugus territory. Well, that's no longer the case. There is a case. There is a confirmed case here, and the likelihood is that there are more than just one person that's sick with it. This is a close community. Once it gets here, it's here, and we haven't had a level of testing in Seneca territory that in any way could have been used in a preemptive manner. I know a few individuals who had flu-like symptoms, including weighted breathing and that kind of stuff, who were only advised to go home and self-quarantine for 14 days. They weren't tested, so there was no way to know. I mean, I get it. They're all saying treat everybody like they're sick. And if you're ill, know that you should treat yourself like you have COVID-19 if you're feeling any symptoms whatsoever. But to treat yourself like that, it's going to be different once for sure. So anyway, there's at least one confirmed case here on Cattaraugus. There's also at least one confirmed case on the Allegheny territory of the Seneca Nation. So both major communities of the Seneca Nation have confirmed cases. Look, that testing can't come fast enough, because I think it's going to be really important that they try to test as many people as possible. Look, right now they do a temperature scan for you to go into certain buildings and that kind of stuff. And the problem is, if you got a temperature, you've probably already had it for a few days. The one test or the one study they did in Italy, when they had the first death in this one, I think it was like an island community. They had one death, and once they had one death, and they had a limited population on the island, they decided to test everybody. And when they tested everybody, they determined that 3% of the population tested positive. Once they had one confirmed death, now they had, I think it was a death, but once they tested, 3% of the population tested positive. Of that population that tested positive, 45% of them, almost half of them, were completely asymptomatic. In other words, almost half of them had no symptoms. They had no idea they were sick. They didn't even have a sniffle, not a cold, not a sore throat. They were completely without symptoms. Now, another percentage of them probably did have symptoms, but may not have thought that their symptoms were severe enough to be COVID-19. So that's the sneaky nature of really almost any, infection, viral, fungal, bacterial, because not everybody reacts the same. We all have different metabolisms. We all have different, levels of or strengths in our immune system. Nobody has a an antibody immunity to this, unless you had it and survived it, I guess. But this is a brand new virus, so nobody had this in their war chest of antibodies in their body. So the question is, once you were exposed to it, did your immune system react quickly and efficiently enough to to keep you from getting infected? That's always the question. And if not, even if you got infected, was it able to overcome it quickly? And that's the difference between people with underlying conditions and people who are younger. The one thing that's a plus about this disease is that children seem to be in the strongest position to survive this. I'm not saying that there haven't been child deaths, but they are very much the exception to the rule. I'm actually in the risk pool. I'm 60 years old. If you're over 60, you're considered at a higher risk. I don't have any underlying conditions, so that's a plus for me. I mean, other than probably carrying more weight than I should be, but so I guess I have that. But I'm pretty healthy. But I'm really cautious. I don't want to get certainly I don't want to bring anything in and get my buddy Jake here sick, or bring anything home to my wife or my father-in-law who's 76 and has a breathing condition already. He's got an oxygen machine. I don't want to expose anybody to that stuff. That's why I stopped going to New York the first week in March, before anybody was really trying to shut much of anything down. Like I said, the first indication that I had that things were getting really, really tough was when the South by Southwest Arts Festival was canceled in Austin, Texas. I said, that's pretty serious. So that's when I, gave the full consideration and said, no, I'm enough to go to New York. But, so we've been dodging a bullet. Look, I've got family in California and family in Texas, and I've stayed in touch with everybody and say, well, thus far we don't have any cases confirmed here on the native territory that I live on. I can't say that anymore. Now, we'll see whether these 2 confirmed cases ultimately translate to many more, or if they were already there for that matter, and this is now just kind of, pulling the curtain back a little bit. We'll see. We'll see. All right. So here's the deal with the buses. So the NFTA, the Niagara Frontier Transportation Authority, they run buses throughout the city, and I think that includes the city buses and that kind of thing. And some of their buses, go up to Niagara Falls. They cover, a good piece of Western New York. I think the farthest trip they make, at least south of the city, has been to the Seneca Nation. They used to pull right to the Seneca Bingo. They used to bring players out. People would come out, take the bus out, and they play bingo. And of course, people who live here on Seneca territory would also take that bus if they had to go to the city for something. They had to go to court or something. I don't know, or visit people. I mean, look, we have a significant percentage of Native people who live in every urban environment: Buffalo, Niagara Falls, New York City. I mean, all of that. So anyway, these buses would come. Its final stop on this southern route was the Seneca Nation. To the Seneca Nation Bingo Hall. I think it was the only stop. As far as, and I didn't know that until I went on the NFTA website and I saw. Well, they have a notice on there now that they have ceased taking bus number 76 to Seneca territory anymore, and they now only go as far as Lotus Point Road, which is the main road to the Evan Gola State Park. So why did that happen? Well, there were some people who were concerned about folks coming by bus. Since the bingo hall wasn't open anymore, it wasn't bringing bingo players, but there were still people. And, we can debate how many, whether it was a handful or more than a handful. I know none of the NFTA buses were very packed as of late. It used to be quite a few people. But so these buses were coming out with folks from Buffalo or along the way from Buffalo. And they were getting off at the bingo hall parking lot. And since bingo hall shut down, the folks who were coming would go across the street and they would go to the gas station across the street. And they would buy, cigarettes or, tobacco products, whatever, vaping products for all I know, whatever they're buying. Well, that continued. And a growing number of Seneca people said, look, Buffalo's a hot spot. We don't want folks from Buffalo coming to Seneca territory and just kind of hanging around. Now, the problem that I have with that is these were the only folks that were getting the attention. There's still people every day that drive in from Buffalo. There's probably still people coming in from New York City for all we know by car, but they have cars. There are actually other there's probably Uber drivers. So there are people who don't have vehicles. There are people who come out in these group vans, like YMCA, probably even some church vans. There are people who have been coming to the Seneca and still come to the Seneca Nation territory specifically to buy tobacco products and other products at the stores. And certainly there have been a bunch of people coming out here to buy gas because there's been this crazy gas war going on both in Cattaraugus territory and Allegheny territory. Gas selling for under $1. $1 cheaper than off territory. Craziness as far as I can see. But again, so there's been these crazy fuel price wars going on, drawing people. So customers have been coming to the Seneca territory. Granted, there's no bingo hall. There are other things that they can't come here, but they certainly can come and get gas. There's no restaurants that they can go eat at. I don't even know if there's any Seneca takeout. I guess there's a few restaurants were doing some sort of takeout, but there was no place to come here and sit down and relax and enjoy yourself at the Seneca Nation territory. You could come here, you could gas up your car, you could buy cigarettes, and then you could go home. Now, if you came by bus, that means you had to hang around until the next bus came through. And a fair number of Seneca people, and it is their right. Now, don't get me wrong. It is the Seneca people have a right to decide whether they want Western New York, Buffalo's bus system coming to the territory or not. It does get a little bit dicey, though, because there's a way to interpret this as scrutinizing the personnel on a bus. So and it's not necessarily a racial thing. But it's certainly, you're talking about people who don't have a vehicle. So if you're going to say everybody else can come, but we don't want people who rode together on a bus who might be strangers to each other, so it might be just a random group of people riding together, and there's some justifiable concerns. But apparently what happened, and I don't know specifically, and I'll as I get more information, at some point the Seneca Nation marshals told the bus driver who pulled onto the bingo hall parking lot that he could no longer drop off and pick up riders at on that stop. So the Cat Res, the store across the street from there, said, well, the bus can come here then. And when the bus did go there, the marshals pulled on to now what is private property, which crosses the line for a lot of people, and told the driver, and at some point threatened the driver that they would confiscate or impound the vehicle. Now, I don't know if Ricky Armstrong or the Seneca Council ever formally contacted, up to this point anyway, the NFTA to say, look, we want you to cease including Seneca territory on your route. And certainly the Seneca Nation has the right to do that. Regardless of how you feel about, focusing on Buffalo or on bus riders as a people that you want to dub as persona non grata. If that's what you want to do, but they certainly have a right to. There are native territories all over the U.S. and Canada, or on either side of the imaginary line, where people have said, no, we don't want people coming through our territories anymore. Seneca Nation is a little tough because there are major highways. Allegheny's got the Interstate 86 and US 17 that goes through. You've got in here in 219 as well that comes down through there. US 219 up in Cattaraugus, you got the thruway Interstate 90. You've got US Route 5 and US Route 20 that cut through. There are major roads that go through these territories. I'm not saying they haven't been blocked, but there's a fallout for doing something like that. Now, so if the Seneca people wanted to put up checkpoints and check everybody who came on the territory, I think they have a right to do it. But there's a cost associated with it, and there's obviously a public relations cost. There are other territories. I think in Tuscarora, there, at least after certain hours, they close off. They don't want people coming through at odd hours of the night. So they've done some things in various places. Certainly a bunch of the places on the other side of the imaginary line have done it. So there's no question that the Seneca people have a right to secure their territory, especially in light of this threat. Whether and although it's not a threat from anybody specific, it's a threat essentially, to the health and welfare of the entire community. But again, I don't know if there was a formal notification to NFTA prior to these two incidents where the marshals stopped the bus. I heard there was, but I don't know I haven't seen that document. So, but I will say, as of tonight, when I went on the NFTA website, they are no longer listing the Seneca Bingo Hall as one of their stops. They're only going as far out as Lotus Point Road, which is the Evangola State Park road off of Route 5. So it's a moot point now, but it was a bit of a contentious point. And I got to tell you, I'm still a little troubled that there is a class of people, I would say, and it's not a race of people, but there's a class of people who have been scrutinized at a higher level than anybody else. And and I'm, look, I travel a lot, and I'm a little bit more cognizant of, but I get it. I get any community having their own apprehension about outsiders coming through, but here in Seneca territory, where there's so much of a retail economy, private sector and Seneca Nation enterprises, it's a little tough to have it both ways. You're either open for business or you're not open for business, and that's problematic. It's a little tough to say we're open for business for people who have their own cars, or we're open for business for people who we think look better than other people. I don't know. So it is a little bit problematic. But I get it. Buffalo is a bit of a hot spot, at least, relative to our immediate surroundings. There's a lot more positive COVID cases out of Buffalo than out of any other place around here. But, but I will say there's no question that the Seneca people had the right to do this. And at some point, somebody, I don't know that it was just the action of the marshals, but at some point, I assume there was enough of a notification to NFTA so that stop is no longer as a part of the route. Now, the question is going to be, is when this is all over, are they going to be able to say, all right, you're welcome to come back now? And if the NFTA says, no, we're good, now, will the Seneca Nation cry foul? Will Seneca's cry foul? I don't know. Well, I guess we'll have to see how that plays out. All right. One other, what I think is a big piece of news is that, like I said, it sounds like the Indian Health Services, in cooperation with the CDC or whatever else, is making testing available to the Seneca Nation. That's a big deal. It's one of the things that I said early on, that when I first heard the quote was, what's your ask to the federal government? And I think one of the obvious asks should have been is, how can the Seneca Nation, with its own clinic and an own health department, begin to administer tests? I don't know at what point the Seneca Nation asked to do that, or if they ever asked. Were they just waiting for it to be offered? I don't know. But we're 2 months into this thing. It's a little concerning to me. And because it hasn't happened yet, it's still, Ricky Armstrong gave a press conference today and or did a video and he was happy to announce it, and it is good news. But man, it's a little late in the coming. And again, I'm not blaming Seneca leadership or anything else, but yeah, it sure would have been nice to have this. Especially when you consider some of the older folks that are here. Now, we have not experienced by at least in my estimation, any real crisis here yet. I haven't heard of any, COVID deaths. Look, we just got 2 confirmed cases, but you don't know because look, people people die, and it'd be nice to know if that this is one of the contributing causes to it. So, on that note about taking a while, here's one of the other things that really concerns me at both the state and the federal level. I have heard reporter after reporter after reporter ask both Donald Trump and Andrew Cuomo, would lives have been saved if they had done a stay-at-home order 2 weeks earlier? Neither the Democrat in Albany or New York, nor the Republican in D.C. are big enough men to admit that if they had acted sooner, they probably would have saved lives. And that they would have been more effective. They both want to deny that doing anything 2 weeks earlier. And look, this thing has been around for 2 months, actually longer than that. But it's been known. It's been listed as a pandemic for over a month. So New York certainly wasn't fast to react. I know there's a lot of people saying, "Oh, we want Andrew Cuomo to be president now." Well, all right, good luck with that. But I find it really problematic that anybody who's in a position of leadership can't admit that swifter action would have been a good thing. I mean, it certainly wouldn't have hurt anything. So at very least, you say it probably would have. But most of them won't, and frankly, their staff won't even say it. So Cuomo's doctors and Trump's doctors, they'll dance all the way around that issue. And they refuse to admit if they had acted sooner that they would have saved lives, and I find that really, really disturbing. Because I think this is a big deal, and when I hear how the messages are being massaged and manipulated, at the same time understanding, like I've been harping on all evening, the fact that the only data being really collected here is data based on people who have been tested, and that's a concern. I mean, that's a concern. And look, I know there's a bunch of people out there who think that this thing is all BS. I don't think so. I am really genuinely concerned. I'm concerned about the health of my own family, my own community, this community, and frankly, a whole lot of people. I mean, I've got friends. I've got older friends in New York City. I've got older friends look, I've got associates from WBAI in New York. I try to reach out. I've got family all over the country. I've reached out to Ed, my buddy Ed, who's done so many of the shows here. Degarundegay. I've tried to reach out to people that, how you doing? I've got a family member in Houston, Texas, who has been tested. I don't know if he's tested positive or not. No, I haven't had any contact with him. But no, I mean, these are real concerns. And look, anything that I've suggested about numbers to look out for, if I'm wrong, I'm going to admit that I'm wrong here. But we're going to see as the testing continues to expand. I would love to know if the testing is expanding faster than the spread of this disease. But I don't think there's any way to know that at this point. And I think we're going to be hard pressed to know what any of these numbers mean probably for years to come. It's going to take a lot of reflection, and there may be numbers that we never know. Because if they aren't testing people who pass away in some capacity, because it's scary. One of the images that I gotta mention. If you haven't seen this image of these mass burials going on Hart Island in New York, it's really disturbing. I mean, the first thing, when you see a big ditch dug, it starts to look like Wounded Knee. The difference is, these are people who are in boxes being put in makeshift coffins or whatever. But I mean, just the idea of this thing, it's really disturbing. And they can't look. They couldn't hide it. Somebody flew a drone over it and shot some video. You can find it online. But I'll tell you, if you're a Native person, knowing what we experienced because of disease that came from Europe, and that's another revelation that has come out. It appears that most of the infection in North America has come from Europe, not from Asia, not from China, but from Europe. And so if you're Native and you're aware of the disease that that ravaged our people, centuries ago. And then when you think about mass burials and that kind of stuff, it's disturbing on a bunch of different levels. And I got to think that there are Native people who, in seeing some of this stuff and experiencing what we're going through, are reliving a sense of historical trauma over again. And, so I want to at least acknowledge that. All right. So we'll be back here on Tuesday. We'll see what the numbers look like. We'll see if any of the things that I'm suggesting concern me come true. And I guess we'll see that on Tuesday. So thanks for joining me. And we'll see you back here on Tuesday. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Nyawe.